Welcome everyone, Fireside Yarns episode 3. With me, I've got Dave as usual. How are you, dude?
Not bad, Vinno, yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, man. How's your week been?
Yeah, all right, you know yourself. We're still in the pandemic. We're at various levels of lockdown at the moment, different states, but that's why we got the virtual Fireside, isn't it?
That's it, man. Doing it through Zoom, kicking it, but we'll get there. We'll get by the Fireside.
Episode 3, man.
Yeah. Episode 3. So tonight we're talking about drugs, aren't we?
We're talking about drugs. Yeah, we're taking, I guess, some legal drugs. Alcohol is a legal drug. Yeah.
Yeah. So I suppose that brings the first question, man. What are the illicit drugs? Or what defines them as illicit drugs? What makes them illegal?
What's illicit drug use? It covers a broad range of substances, wouldn't it? And there'd be 3 types, I think, from what I could see. It would be illegal drugs, so they're drugs that are illegal in Australia for us. And then you'd have pharmaceutical drugs, and other psychoactive substances. Now, what are they? Like, so what's an illegal drug, do you think? It's like the heroines, cannabis, cocaine, amphetamine type drugs, stimulants. And you got your pharmaceutical drugs. They're available obviously by prescription, or just from the pharmacy over the counter. They're like legal drugs, but however, if misused in the wrong way, can be illegal. Or and they're your opiate-based pain relief medications, steroids, and other over the counter. So then you're legal. Oh, go on. Yep.
Yeah, no, it's just a question, man. Like I haven't actually looked into it. With your pharmaceutical ones, if you haven't got a prescription, is there what are the penalties? You know, any of the penalties, or does that come under that illicit banner, or you're not sure?
Well, whenever you're using them for purposes or in quantities prescribed by a doctor, it becomes illegal. Or if you're in possession of any prescription drug that's not prescribed to you, it's illegal. Or if you're selling it as well. Yeah.
Mm.
And then, but you've got legal illicit drugs as well. You've got or the illegal use of drugs, so the likes of paints, glues, sniffing that inhalants such as petrol. And then you've got those synthetic legal highs and cannabis that you can get in the head shops. And then also traditional stuff like kava, certain types of mushrooms, peyote, all that type of stuff, depending on where you are in the world. But yeah, so there's a lot of ways. And then your legal stuff like alcohol. You know, there's a lot of caffeine and in your pre-workouts.
Yeah, well, they've been a big thing over the years, haven't they? With the amount of chemicals in them, and certain pre-workouts have been outlawed, haven't they, because of the stuff in there?
They get banned. Yeah, they get banned, and then they have to rebrand, or they come back with a version 2 or 3 but they just change the chemical a little bit, or they try and look at it. A couple of years ago, it was pretty Wild Westy, about 5-6 years ago, and then it just started really stamping down. And it's harder in Australia, of course, to get these type of supplements in. But again, what makes something illegal or legal is laws. It's not whether something affects you a certain way or how it can be abused. It's a lot of times it can be political, it can be systemic. It depends. It depends what year we're in and what age group we're talking about has been affected. Yeah. How common is it?
Yeah. Right down a rabbit hole. Well, that's the next question, isn't it? How common is illicit drug use? How, in Australia alone, we've got some pretty bad statistics. Big statistics depending on the drugs. I mean, cannabis has gone up from 10.4% to 11.6%. From 2016, 2019. It's the data on that one.
It'd be 9 million Australians,
especially in the pandemic at the moment. I mean, it's been in the news about how much alcohol use has skyrocketed. it'd be interesting to see the figures on illicit drugs, for that matter, with people being stuck at home. But even
I wonder what the up-to-date, we'll only find out after it, won't we? What effect lockdown or the pandemic has had. Because I'd imagine there'd be some manufacturing and supply issues, there'd be all types of crap they have to deal with. The heightened restrictions has police looking at people a bit more, particularly coming over borders, getting in and out of the country, and we're getting traced. So I can only imagine for mules how harder it is.
Mm.
Well, 9 million Australians. This was back before the pandemic. So about 43% of the country had tried drugs, and then within the past year, you'd have 26 million? 16% of the country of 26 million people had tried an illicit drug or been high in the past year. And you gave those some statistics there. I mean, the difference between 10.4% to 11%, 2.5% of cocaine up to 4% of people using it. There was an increase already. I wonder if the pandemic brought it up or down.
Well, I suppose your party drugs, like ecstasy, MDMA, and those sorts of things, I dare say there might be a drop in those with clubs closing down and those sorts of things. It'd be interesting, like you said, once it's all done, to see what the statistics are in regards to that. Because
I think we got to talk about the statistics we have are outside of the pandemic.
Yes,
and hopefully one day so will we be too. So I think we can trust them as a gauge of our normal behaviours within. Although you don't know what it's going to be like after it either. But if we're to talk about outside of it, like what are the effects of illicit drug use? Like what affects illegal drugs or the misuse of drugs in our society? What effects does it have on us?
Well, I mean, you can have a look when we're talking about the effects. I mean, it comes down to the drug, doesn't it? But if you have a look at remote rural communities with the dramas that they're having with ice, methamphetamines in those communities, and the costs of healthcare in regards to that. I mean, there's 11 tons of methamphetamine consumed by Australians every year. And that's going up. As we just said with the pandemic, it might be coming down. We're not sure. But 4.6 tons of cocaine and 2.2 tons of MDMA. So, the ones that we're not sure of the full effects are the ones that are manufactured at home laboratories, aren't they? Like your ice, your ecstasy, the ones that aren't regulated. That those effects are always changing, aren't they? But the cost to the healthcare is always there.
Well, you talk about it's not the hard thing about drugs is it just doesn't affect the individual. You know what I mean? It affects families, affects kids, friends, everyone involved with the persons. There's massive health impacts. There's disease, death, overdose, hospitalization. You've social implications, don't you? Like it can create a more violent atmosphere, crime, and generally traumatic situations for everyone involved. There's an economic impacts, and like you were talking about earlier, the cost of healthcare, the cost of law enforcement, the justice system, and paying, and then you've got the economic burden on the person and the family themselves because of the habit itself.
Well,
and the costs that come with that.
2019, $11.3 billion was spent by Australians to support drug habits. 11.3 billion. We'll get down further into the regulation and legalizing some of these drugs and whatnot, but that amount of money, and then
the cost. That's one of the costs, isn't
it? That's crazy, and where is that money going? I suppose. But yeah,
well, imprisoning people, and it's like that. I think of that cost on the person, that's heavy prison sentences for manufacturing and dealing drugs, and large amounts of possession can lead to prison time. So it's not just dealers, and it's everyone involved in the whole economic system that's there. You know, some specific population groups are at greater risk of experiencing disproportionate harms because of drug use as well. I mean, you got young people, people with mental health issues, minorities is because of socio-economic issues, and also socially vulnerable communities. That's a they're the worst people hit by this. So the people that really are at the at the mercy of society already, they're the ones affected by it the most. And yeah,
well, it's those people looking for a way out a lot, isn't it? That, you know, looking for the light at the end of the tunnel. And, you know, sometimes substance abuse is the way they turn it. Sometimes it's just, you know, a bit of fun on a weekend. That all comes under that, but the effects are still there, money wise, and the family life. And I suppose that brings the next question of what are the ways to regulate or minimise that use? How can, you know, what ways have we got? One way is I see is regulation. I'll use, say, ecstasy or pills as an example, and we've seen this with festivals and whatnot, with the pill testing tents and the issue around that, and the government not wanting to even entertain that idea. But personally,
it's proven to work. It works.
It does work. Yeah. I mean, if you go to and everyone knows it's common sense. If you go to somebody on the street and you buy a pill off them, you don't know where that pill's come from at all, right? But if that was to be regulated, it would still, you know, health critics are probably going to say no, it's still going to be bad for them, but they're still going to do it one way or another, aren't they? And if you're making it as safe as possible for those people that are using those substances, then, you know, you've just minimised the risk, haven't you? And it's taking out of that black market, you know, making it in the toilet type crap, isn't it?
There's really just three ways, isn't there, that you can regulate or even minimise drug use in society. So you got you can criminalise it, which we do with a lot of it. We can legalise it, which we don't do a lot, and we can decriminalise it, which has been done in a lot of countries, as well as legalising. But I think with the most success so far has been legalising it or decriminalising it.
And that's so. Historically, we've criminalised it, haven't we? And that hasn't worked.
For the most part, that's prohibition. That's right. Now, criminalising is drug possession. What have we got now? Drug possession is an offence under Section 10 of the Drug Misuse and Trafficking Act, which is a penalty of 2 years in prison for drug possession of a certain amount. You just think of that. And the average prison sentence for a person convicted of drug trafficking is 5 years. So that's what we're doing. That's generally how we criminalise it. You know, we put people in jail. Whereas if you were to decriminalise it, now the manufacture and sale is still legal, but what you're doing then is you're putting the onus on the seller, and the actual victim of all this, the money that we would put in the prison system, which can be up to $100,000 for a person a year. So if you can imagine, if you put $100,000 into the healthcare of someone who is suffering from drug abuse, I think you could do a lot better.
Or even the education. Give it back to Happy Healthy Harold. Man. Bring that dude back.
Well, if you legalise it, like you're saying, then you can profit from it, or at least we can get taxes for it. That would help those social programs and educate kids in school, of course. Yeah, and we can regulate them similar to we do with tobacco and alcohol and caffeine and stimulants and substances and paracetamol and prescription medicine. Like, we find a way. Like, the problem with prohibition really is it doesn't work. It creates black market. It creates criminal enterprise. It drives people to engage with criminals and the underworld and more violent situations. You know what I mean? Black markets promote more potent and concentrated drug use as well. So in America during Prohibition, beer was drank less, obviously. It was harder to come across. And that's simply a logistical issue, isn't it? If I'm smuggling, if I want to keep alcohol going, I'm going to go wine and spirits, which is harder and it's rougher on people. But that's what people drank. All of a sudden it switched to that. Prohibition came in, beer again. And you can see the deaths from the unregulated, the alcohol quality was terrible in Prohibition. There was people drinking that. Formaldehyde. Moonshine, yeah.
It was a perfect example.
Yeah, exactly.
Like you said, the alcohol prohibition in America is, quite a commonly studied case of failure.
Great example.
As criminalizing alcohol. And once again, America has completely different issues to us as far as drugs and all that in regards to their proximity and borders. But it was no different.
But we can study their trends. They've got more people than us. We can study their trends.
Yeah. But it goes to show that old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. So even though it was illegal, they were getting it, making it themselves or bringing it from Canada. They were getting it. And you're not going to stop people, by making, you can make it illegal and it'll deter people, but it's not going to completely stop them, is it?
That's right. People, again, like I was saying, they'll go to more potent and concentrated drugs because if they have to hide, if they have to go behind a wall to do it, if they have to go wherever they're going, they're going to want the most powerful thing that they don't have to do that as much. And the problem then with lower quality drugs, again, they're more dangerous as well. They're less, and they're less, they're less pure. So it's not just beer to wine and spirits. You've got cocaine to crack. You've got, instead of methamphetamines, people are on ice. Instead of weed, you're seeing people going to synthetic cannabis, which is fucking causing death and crazy psychological issues with people. And we can know what happened with crack in America, and we know what happened with ice here. In different countries, they find ways to do this safer. And I think we owe it to the future and drug users of Australia that we know this doesn't work. It hurts people. Prisons are fucking animal factories. When you send people to prison, they have to change, and they have to become moldable into a criminal in there to survive. Really, in a lot of jails.
Well, in a lot of cases,
I don't think it works.
In a lot of cases, you've got a petty criminal that goes in there and comes out as ends up offending again in worse ways, don't they? Because they become a bit more professional as a criminal in there. Steering away from that, you mentioned before other countries that have done the right thing as far as drugs. Is it Portugal?
Portugal, great example. Now they just decriminalized it. So a good example of Portugal, right? They in the early 2000s, all right, Portugal had drug-induced AIDS rates that were the largest in the EU. Portugal is the second highest in HIV among drug users in the EU, and they're dealing with rising deaths due to overdoses, rising rates of tuberculosis and Hep B and Hep C, all of which are associated with drug misuse. So they got together and they said, what's the best way we can do? They decriminalized it and they put all that money into the health sector. And then HIV plummeted. I think it was from 2001 to 2009, I think it was. It plummeted by 90%. Heroin use dropped by 3/4. Because again, people don't have to get that crazy high and go behind closed doors. They're less worried, so they can just have the weed. They can just have those little highs that are a bit better. They went, the decriminalization route, and I think that's good. Now, again, the drugs aren't legal, okay, and the sanctions are more civil. So even when you're caught with marijuana, it's more like a speeding fine than it is prison time. So it's an over a certain amount, then of course you can be dealt with dealer charges.
It's more of America rather than a criminalization.
Yeah, and again, the criminal record. If I'm someone without a criminal record, is more likely to be able to get a better job. All right, and if you're able to get a better job, you're able to get out of these socio-economic issues that would cause you to be depressed and drug, all these types of things. Okay, or drive you to the black market to make your money that way if you can't get a decent job. So again, making it legal, or at least decriminalize it, at least takes a stigma away from people who then decide to leave it. So if you decide to leave drug use and the criminal enterprise that comes with it, if you have to for the rest of your life drag around a criminal record, it's always going to be weak. So there's not a big incentive for people to leave, because right now they can't leave.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's like the Hotel California.
They get caught in that poverty trap, don't they? Yeah,
that's right. Yeah.
So, in your opinion, then we'll take turns at this, I suppose, and would really like to hear some feedback from you guys in the comments when it comes to, say, decriminalising drugs. Which drugs do you think would be the top of your list? So, give me the drugs that you think should remain outlawed and ones that you think should be decriminalised.
If we're going to see, I hate the prohibition of anything, but generally, if I was going to give a priority list, I would say we would do marijuana for many reasons. There's medical reasons, and I think, as we talked about earlier, 0 deaths compared to what alcohol's impact is. I think you could then go into the likes of mushrooms. There's psilocybin trips that I've heard can be done if under the right circumstances, can be quite a good thing. Like even in America, the Alcoholics Anonymous, I think, stemmed from a psilocybin treatment that apparently was more successful. There have been a lot of scientific studies to that. I don't know. Going into your more harder drugs like cocaine, methamphetamines, and MDMAs and stuff, I think you could, if people are going to take these drugs, why not have them well regulated, safer, pure drugs, I guess. Or you could then, the manufacturers then, you know, they have to actually produce something that's consumable. They'll be held accountable. Right now, not only are we not getting taxes from them, but the manufacturers are not held accountable. The dealers, when someone dies, very hard to trace what, you know, and people are selling people shit. That's a lot of the reasons where people die.
And that's what we see. I mean, I'll use it as an example again, but you know, ecstasy and your pills and that sort of stuff at festivals. You know, we've got those cases of people dropping all of their pills all at once because of the police coming and those sorts of things, and them not even knowing what's in that, and not even having the option of the pill testing tents and all those sorts of things, where regulating the manufacture of those would take a lot of those questions out. And yes, it would still be dangerous, as all drugs are. Even, you know, taking too much Panadol is dangerous, you know, but at least then people have got more of an informed choice. And that's what I'm about, is having more of an informed choice about what you take in regards to those ones. As far as cannabis and that, I agree with you. That conversation's already happening, or, you know, that the outlook on cannabis is changing worldwide. And as we can see in the States, with the legalization of it in some states, and as you mentioned before, the 0 deaths. Now, people will still argue that there's, you know, health risks involved with it, as there is with anything. But the data is starting to show through on the benefits of cannabis use in some areas, particularly Parkinson's. There's been significant studies and breakthroughs in regards to that. I think we'd be silly to ignore those sorts of studies. So, yeah, as far as cannabis, I see that. And your mushrooms, I don't know too much about those. So
me neither.
That'd be an interesting one.
So I've heard. There's a lot of podcasts out there where you can get this information from.
Mate, you speak to the older generation, and they'll tell you all about mushrooms, won't they? That's used to be.
Well, there's a lot of studies out there for it, you know, already. So ultimately, I think as well, I just think the people who benefit from this are the gangs, and they're the criminal enterprise. Just take it out of the hands of criminals into the health framework, train professionals. It would create trades. You know, there would be trades behind it. There would be education processes. There would be industry. There would be factories. You know what I mean? We would have. You
Look
know,
at alcohol as an example, man. Like we've got pubs, we've got bottlers, you know, places that, you know, you go to the pub, you have food and those sorts of things. That's a whole industry and sub-industries in regards to it. You've got the wine industry with vineyards and wine tasting and all those sorts of things. And, you know, there is so much potential there to, especially with, you know, coming out of this pandemic, this is a perfect opportunity for these sorts of things because there are so many people out of work, so many industries that have crumbled or are really struggling. You know, coming out of this, we're going to have to, as a country, look at options and try and boost that economy, you know.
Well, drug use is escapism. Ultimately, I think that's where a lot of heavier drugs get used as well. And when you see those vulnerable people we were talking about earlier that are more susceptible to becoming addicts, it's because if you have a traumatic experience and you can take something that makes you just fucking think about fucking, you know, chasing dragons and fucking all that, you know what I mean? Like pink elephants. If you can just be like, it doesn't hurt anymore. I think that's where it comes from. And I think the danger of these types of eras we're in right now, whether it's a depression or it's a recession or whether a pandemic or however you want to look at it, people are going to try for that escapism, aren't they? Right now, some people are going, what helps some people is conspiracy theories as well. It helps the idea that, you know what, things aren't as bad as it is, or things are worse than it is, but I'm in on it, so it's good. But then you've also got drugs as well. So there's not just ideologies that get stronger. It is drug use. I'd imagine that this is people that don't want to think about or worry about this type of stuff will go into drugs and will find escapism in it, I think. But apart from that, I think that's an argument maybe against legalization, isn't it? That the promotion of these drugs will promote escapism and people being outside of the frame of mind and more. But I don't know. I think the data has shown in places like Portugal that heavy drug use goes down. Okay, and the stigma and the decriminalization, it goes down.
But like you said, as with people, you know, the escapism, people are going to find that the availability is there, whether we like to admit it or not. The availability is there, yeah. And well, yeah, alcohol, you know, is another form that people.
That's allowed.
It is allowed, and it gets abused quite often. But one way or another, people are going to find or get access to those drugs, and they're going to escape, aren't they? And as you mentioned before, it's a trap, because if they're in the dumps and they're down and they're looking for that escape, and they get involved in the illicit drugs, and then in turn they, you know, become or get in trouble with the law, get arrested, they're never gonna get out of that trap, are they? They're never gonna pick back up. But you know, if they're looking for that escape and there's the funding, whether it be through the legalization of some drugs or the decriminalization, as you mentioned with Portugal, where it still gives them the opportunity to come back and bounce back from that dark period. That's
or even to go further. Yeah, with legalization, all right. If my friend's sad and he's like, "Fuck, I don't want to think about this. I want to take some shit. I don't want to feel this way." I would rather send him. Instead of sending him, I should say, to fucking go here, talk to this bloke down this fucking alley, meet or go into this den or whatever, like wherever you're going to find your shit, whatever kind of criminal enterprise you have to engage with, particularly with the harder drugs. I'd rather send them to the shop where there's a dude behind the counter. How you feeling, mate? Oh, so what are you trying to get out of this? Oh, mate, I'm feeling fucking there. You just want to forget? Oh, you here, try this. Oh, you can't sleep? Oh, man, this is good for this. Oh, you know what I mean? You have professionals there that are ready to show you. And even with weed, you know what I mean? There are different types of weed, so I've heard, that you can. So I've heard there's sativas and there's indicas, but people don't have these options, so they're going to take what they're going to take. But if
They're
you
gonna
did
take-
give people these options
they're gonna
that
take
were more catered,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I
it's
agree
a
with
safer.
you, yeah,
It's safer. Yeah.
well, even at the moment, if you're feeling down, you go and grab alcohol, and it's a depressant, isn't it? It's going to make you worse.
Whatever you grab.
Yeah.
These are our family members. You know what I mean? Everyone is touched by drugs in some way, aren't they? Like everyone knows a friend or they're like, fuck. But instead of, because we love these people and because we care about them and we want to see them get out of it, and we don't want to shame them. We want to be like, there's a way out. You know what I mean? Like we've all got issues one way or another, whether it's gambling, whether it's drugs, whether it's been angry, whether it's been a pushover, whether it's been a procrastinator, whatever way you're not doing what you're not living up to your own potential. It's bad. And drugs have a particular knack and a particular stigma behind them, and a vast legal and health consequence and an economic consequence. There's got to be a better way. And I think spending $100,000 on a year for putting someone in jail, I think we can spend. There has to be a way we can spend $50,000 instead on health treatment on them. There's got to be, isn't it? You know what I mean? Like that's housing. That's a wage. Surely we could put someone in a hospital and help them, or make it legal and also have that as well, so we can have the revenue from this stuff, which is in the billions. And we've seen that when it's legalized in countries like the Netherlands and America. This money can be put towards hospitals and schools and other stuff. You can fund the fucking community, not just industry. You know, not just industry. It's social welfare.
Absolutely. And like you mentioned there,
and it's fun. I've heard, you know, heard.
But like you said, you know, you touched on it at the start as far as chroming and, you know, sniffing glues and all those sorts of things, where younger people are taking to those sorts of drugs because they haven't got the access to, you know, maybe some other drugs or alcohol and those sorts of things. You know, by decriminalising or legalising some of these drugs, and mind you, we are not saying all of them we're not saying let's bring ice into the chemist at all.
Let's trial, but that might be the case for methamphetamine.
Yeah. Sorry.
Oh no, you're just not. Go on. I was going to talk about why people wouldn't need ice, because they would get amphetamines instead from a chemist. Yeah,
that's the point that I'm making. Like, if they've got access to these regulated and properly manufactured substances, they wouldn't have the need to sniff cans and fuel and glue and all these other things, and the manufacture of ice. Like, it is just destroying communities. So taking that, especially out of the hands of the wrong people, would be a massive change to some of these communities.
Yeah, absolutely. The health, it's safer. It's fucking safer, regardless. Okay, if someone is going into a medical building or a legal establishment to find what they want, to get the way they want, it's just safer. It's safer than going to fucking Jimmy's fucking house. You wait for them you can't go there. You're gonna meet a fella on a BMX under the fucking bridge, all right? You meet him here. You give him your money. You wait fucking there. I'll go to Jimmy's house or wherever I'm going. I'll come back. This is your shit. Hand it. Don't talk. See you around. And whatever's in your fucking hand as a kid is what you're going to smoke, or you're going to sniff, or you're going to do whatever. And you're going to trust these people, okay? But if there was legal repercussions, if you could trace, if you had receipts, okay, or even with the decriminalization route or the social program route, like you were talking about, pill testing and drug testing at events. If you're gonna have a black market, well, at least decriminalize it and make it safer then for the user. Buy a little bit extra, make tests available for everyone, destigmatize. Another good one is injection rooms, Vinno. So we've seen a huge decrease whenever injection rooms are brought in of needles that are found. You know what I mean? That are just found on the streets and used and cause damage and cause that is very dangerous for people to pick up or misuse, right? Immediately stopped it. Huge drop.
And that's the thing, like you touched on before about taking the, I suppose, the dodginess out of it. And I was having a laugh there because it just reminded me of I won't mention the place, but it's near Singleton. And every year, man, there's usually a fire up in there. And there's certain places up in this scrubland where if the gate's closed, we don't go in. You know, the fire could be threatening the house. We just don't go anywhere near it. And it's because when you do go in there, there's barrels and, you know, an old donger. And you can tell just from looking at it that it's dodgy as shit. Like,
Yeah.
it's going to explode. And we actually did have some that past fire season, the big one, we did have a couple of places like that explode. And that's an example of, you know, the effects it has, not just on the people taking it, but and all the manufacturers, but anybody else involved or in that area.
They're not under the same safety regulations, are they? Like, if you have a manufacturing factory, you have to meet certain regulations. You could have a fire inspector show. Walter fucking White is not expecting the fire or fucking Jethro or fucking El Jimbo in his fucking shack is not expecting the fire inspector. No?
Some of these places that I'm talking about, Jimbo's and Walter White shacks, are higher quality than these. These are dodgy as shit. Like,
even more so than you know what I mean?
Like, even smoke a cigarette near these motherfuckers, man, because they fucking blow up.
I'd rather have a tradie. You know, doing it. It's like, okay, I'm a fucking chemist. I know what I'm making here. This is made in a fucking. Here's my brand as well. You know, here's my certification from the government that this is this much percentage potency. You're not less ODs as well, because again, you're getting something and you're understanding what you're taking, not just what is this meth or is this MDMA or what is this. You're taking a quantity that's measurable and that you understand your limits with. Certain with alcohol, it's like with alcohol, if we were just trying to find moonshine and we didn't have a proof on the front of it, and that's why people. Promote safer consumption of alcohol by having all that choice, because you can say, oh, I just like having me fucking me Great Northern originals, and then some people are like, I want me fucking 8%, you know what I mean? Ale, give that shit.
Burn off double blacks.
That's right. I want a fucking Ted Platinums. Remember the Platinums were like 8%? Like people rocking up with a carton of these black and silver Teds. And I was like, man, over one show, and you're fucked. There
was some people that you just see them walk up with and you knew you were in for a big night anyway.
Yeah. There's that and the fridge pack of Woodstock and UDLs.
Don't you spit on the old UDLs, man, the Woodstock. So fucking green back in the day.
No, but that's what I mean. Like, you know, or you have the motherfuckers on the goon back. You know, because then because of the amount of money you have to go for that higher potency, don't you?
Yeah. Well, yeah.
It all goes back to it. But I think ultimately, why would we put the effort into making these changes? Well, what's the human impact of all this? We can not want to be around people on the street and homeless people that are drugged up and all. But ultimately, that's someone's fucking brother, isn't it? It's someone's sister, it's someone's kid, it's someone's fucking mom and dad. It's somebody's family member. It's a human. Or if it's no one's family member, it's him or her is one of us. So how do we help them? Do we lock them up?
Mate, as we spoke about before, locking them up, we've done that and it hasn't worked. It's created worse criminals. So to speak, it's
hardened, more hardened.
They haven't necessarily been a criminal going into prison, but being exposed to certain aspects of that society, they have come out as criminals. It hasn't worked, and it's still not working. And we can use these other countries as examples of the change and a pathway forward. Whether we like to admit it or not, we're never going to remove drugs. They're here, you know, there's always new drugs coming out or different strains of drugs. certain illicit substances can be, I think, made legal so that like as you said, the government can make money, and that money can go back into the system through taxation. There's the data and the evidence to back those studies up. Others with the decriminalisation, so that people aren't labelled for life, they might hit a bad point. And you see it all the time with say alcohol. People hit a bad point, they turn to alcohol, they do overcome it, and they haven't got a criminal record for it, right? If they turn to another substance, then they're labelled for life, and it's very hard for them to get out of that trap. I think the way forward is to use those, or take those learnings from these other countries, and move forward and better our system in Australia to help people. We're not here to, we shouldn't be around trying to kick people down. We should be trying to help people up in every way possible. So if that means, decriminalising something to then make that a focus area to bring them back up to a condition that they are or previously were, that's what we should be focusing on, not condemning people, which, as I said, doesn't work. So, mate, that's sort of episode 3. It's only a shorter one tonight. We decided to go a shorter one after last week's episode. That was pretty in depth.
Fucking Afghanistan.
We're still getting some feedback about that, and we still want more.
I want more people to check that out. Even though things have changed, I still think it's quite relevant there. I still think it's a very relevant video.
Yeah,
check that shit out. Let that be your drug. Let Fireside yarn be your drug. Put us in your pipe. Inject us in your arm. You know what I mean? Let us run through your veins and your lungs and your nose. Okay, and it's safer. It's safer. You know what I mean? And it's free. It's free. Just like and subscribe. That's all you have to do.
You're all over it, dude.
Mate. Look, ultimately, look. 2/3 of drug-induced deaths, everybody, are accidental. Now, that's because of it being illegal and a shit quality product out there that's not regulated, and people are dying, all right? Then you've got the rest of them are considered intentional. We're not happy, and it's not working. One way or the other. So, do like and subscribe. But the info, Vinno, I think it's very important, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Very important.
I think, we're
not experts.
Briefly on some of the statistics and information tonight, but as I said, get in the comments, have a chat with us about it. Nobody has done that yet. Be the first one to do it. The only person that's commented is Dave, commenting and talking about himself. So
I literally said something like, "Who's that Irish guy? He's looking good." And that was it.
That's the only comment we've got so far.
To that.
So please get in the comments.
Tell us we're wrong. Fucking get in there. Make fun of us. Make fun of our hair. You know what I mean? Make fun of this paint job. Like, get in the comments. Get amongst it. Ultimately, we're going to have some funny videos too, Vinno. I think another thing to say to people is we will have a bit more upbeat, more interactive and fun shit. We're going to use these topical subjects. They're going to grease our wheels out here and get used to being broadcasters. And we're only new to this fucking podcast game. I think we'll get better.
Well, I hope we fucking get better.
For your case.
Yeah.
For your sake. Yeah. Look.
All right. Next week we've got a big episode. We're going to not mention what it is. We've got it in the works, and we've already started doing some planning for it. So please like and subscribe. Tune in this next week as well. And it's not too late to get in and give us some feedback on those previous episodes. It's only going to help us get better, and we would really enjoy the interaction. Dave, again, man, have a good week. Take it easy. Talk soon.
See you, Vinno.